Alright, today we're going to do part 2 of the benchmark review. And so you're going to take out your notes and you're going to write down all of the things that I do. So we're on page 97, so go ahead and pause your video so that you can set up your notebook. Alright, this is the first example. So it gives you a table, and what I have to do is I have to find the rate of change, the y-intercept, and then from those two things I want to write an equation. Then I'm going to make a graph and then tell me if it's proportional or non-proportional. So the very first thing I want to do is I want to do rate of change. In order for me to find my rate of change, I need to pick 2 points on my table, and I want to find the difference between them. Well, I know that 0 and 3, the difference between that is 3, so I'm adding 3. 0 plus 3 gives me that 3. Then I have to use the same 2 points on the other side. Well, between 3 and 0, I know that I am subtracting 3. And I also know that rate of change is change in y over my change in my x. It's always y over x. And so I want to put this y, which is negative 3, and I want to put that over my x, which is positive 3. Then I divide that. Negative 3 divided by 3 is just negative 1. So my rate of change is negative 1. In order for me to find my y-intercept, what I have to do is I have to find where my x value is 0, the number that's right next to it, which is 3. That's going to be my y-intercept. So your y-intercept is where x is 0. So now that I have my rate of change and my y-intercept, I can easily find my equation. So my equation is going to start with y is equal to, my rate of change always goes first, so it's negative 1 x plus 3. But this is one other thing that you need to keep in mind. That 1 in front of that x is really imaginary, so my equation should look like this. Y is equal to negative x plus 3, because I know that in front of that x is always a 1. So there's your equation. Alright, so now I want to graph these points on my graph. So I'm going to plot all of these points that are in my table into my graph. So the very first one is negative 1 and 4, so I go over negative 1 and I go up to 4. The next one is 0 and 3, so I stay at 0 and I go up to 3. The next one is 3 and 0, so I want to go over to 3 and I want to stay right at 0. And my last one is 4 and negative 1, so I want to go over to 4 and down to negative 1. Don't forget to connect your dots. And so we have our graph. The last thing I need to do is say if it's proportional or non-proportional. Remember that a proportional graph goes through 0, 0, which is right here at your origin, and it's a straight line. So let's look at our graph. Well, our graph is a straight line, but it does not go through 0, 0, and so therefore I know that it is non-proportional. Alright, let's look at your next example. So the next one gives you a graph and you have to find the rate of change, the y-intercept, the equation, and then tell me if it's proportional or non-proportional. Remember that anytime we have a graph, the first thing I want to do is find some points on my graph. So I want to find the points that are right on those crosshairs. So I have that one, I have this one here, I could even use this one, and then if you look at my table I only need 3 points. So the very first point is 0 and 4. The next point is negative 1 and 2. And the third one is negative 2 and 0. So there's a couple of ways that we can find our rate of change. Remember that anytime that I have a graph I want to create that table, and because I created that table I can easily find my rate of change. So I know between 4 and 2 I'm subtracting 2. And I know between 0 and negative 1 I'm subtracting 1. Remember that it's always change in y over your change in your x. So my change in my y is negative 2, and my change in my x is negative 1. Negative 2 divided by negative 1 is just a positive 2, so I know that my rate of change is positive 2. Now I need to find my y-intercept. So what I can do is I can take my highlighter and I can highlight my y-axis. And what I want to find is where does those dots, or where does my graphing line touch my y-axis? Well, it touches right here at this 4, so I know my y-intercept is 4. But if I forgot how to do that, I can look at my table and remember that I always look where x is 0. and the number that's next to it, which happens to be 4, will also be my y-intercept. Now I have to create an equation. So my equation is going to always start with y is equal to. My rate of change always goes first, so I'm going to put y is equal to 2, and then I always put x. That's always my input, so x, and then plus my y-intercept always goes last in my equation, so plus 4. I have to determine if this is proportional or non-proportional. Well, I know that if it's a straight line and it goes through 0, 0, then it's going to be proportional. So let's look at our graph. It is a straight line, but it does not go through that origin. It doesn't go through 0, 0, and so therefore I know that it is non-proportional. Let's look at the next example. So on this graph, I want to determine my constant of proportionality. Remember that constant of proportionality is that formula that's k is equal to y over x. And so I want to go ahead and make sure that I circle my y-axis right there and my x-axis. So I want to take the point. Let's go ahead and circle. So we never want to start at 0, 0. We always want to start where there's numbers. So let's go ahead and plot the points on our graph. And so all I have to do is I have to take one of those points and then I have to divide them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put this line here and here. And I'm going to do the same thing on this next point. Now I could use either point, but if you notice on this one, there's no number here, so I would have to determine that number. But on this one, there's already a number there, and there's a number on my x-axis, so let's use that one. So I have 216, and I want to divide that by 4. So I have 216 divided by 4. 4 goes into 21 5 times. 21 minus 20 is 1, and bring down your 6, and then 4 goes into 16 4 times. So I know that my k value, or my constant of proportionality, is equal to 54. So my constant of proportionality, I just take one of those points and I do y divided by x. Alright, let's look at the next one. It's a word problem, so you're going to need a highlighter. It says Albert earns $5.95 per hour working after school and owes his mom $30. He needs at least $215 for his holiday shopping. How many hours must he work to reach his goal? So let's highlight the important information. He earns $5.95 per hour. He already owes his mom $30, and then he needs at least $215. The words at least are going to tell me which inequality I'm going to be using. And it says how many hours must he work to reach his goals. Let's go ahead and underline our question. Alright, so now what I need to do is I need to create an equation. So I need at least 215. So let's start with 215. The words at least tell me that I could make more than 215. 215 is the minimum that I could make. So I need a greater than or equal to sign there. Then I know that $5.95 per hour, anytime I have the word per, it is my rate of change. So I'm going to put $5.95, and I'm going to put an x next to it, because that per tells me to multiply, and right between here is a multiplication, imaginary multiplication symbol. So I have $5.95x, and then I'm going to either plus or minus, and it's going to be greater than 215. So I have already used $5.95. I've already used 215, and I've already done the at least part. The only thing that's left is this $30. Well, I know the $30 is going to go right here in my equation. So all I want to know is it going to be plus or minus. Okay, well, he owes his mom $30. The word owes tells me that I'm subtracting, so I'm going to put minus 30. So it should read $5.95 x minus 30 is greater than or equal to 215. Now I want to go ahead and solve it. So remember that I can use my bubbles. So in my first bubble I put that variable, which is x. With that x, I know that I'm multiplying $5.95. And x times 595 is 595x. And then I'm subtracting 30. 595x minus 30 is just 595x minus 30. And then that's all equal to 215. Then I have to work backwards, so I want to do the opposite. The opposite of minus 30 is to add 30. So I have to do 215 plus 30. Well, 5 plus 0 is 5, 1 plus 3 is 4, and I bring down the 2. So I get 245. Then I have to do the opposite of times 595, and I want to divide by 595. So I have to take that 245 and divide by 595. So 245 divided by 595. For the purpose of this example, I want to go ahead and use a calculator. Alright, so I'm going to take 245 and I'm going to divide that by 595. So I get 41 point, all those decimals. And what I want to do, because I'm dealing with money, I only want to use 2 places behind the decimal. So my answer is going to be 41.17. So he needs to work how many hours does he need to work? Well, he needs to work more than 41 hours, so I'm going to say that he needs to work 42 hours. So that is your final answer. If he only worked 41 hours, he would not have enough money. Alright, this is your last example. It says the opening of the scissors forms an angle. Write and solve an equation to determine the value of x. So this is one that we haven't done in class, and so that's why I wanted to do this one with you. So this has a straight line here. All straight lines are equal to 180, so keep that in mind. All straight lines is equal to 180. Because I know that, I want to add this angle and this angle together to equal that 180. So I'm going to take that 8x and I'm going to add 116 to it, and that's all equal to that 180. So now this is just a two-step equation. So I can do my circles on here. Well, I know that my variable in this instance is an x. What I'm doing with that variable is I'm multiplying that by 8. 8 times x is just 8x. And then I'm adding 116. And so 8x plus 116 is just 8x plus 116. And that's all equal to that 180. I have to do the opposite of plus 116, so I'm going to be subtracting 116. And 180 minus 116 I have to do off to the side. I have to borrow, so I know that this 8 becomes a 7 and this 0 becomes a 10. And so I know that 10 minus 6 is 4 and 7 minus 1 is 6, and then 1 minus 1 is just 0. So I know that this is 64. Then I have to do the opposite of times 8, which is to divide by 8. 64 divided by 8 I know is 8. So my answer is x is equal to 8. So just keep in mind that your triangles are all equal to 180 as well as all of your straight lines. So go ahead and glue these notes into page 97 in your notebook, and then I want you to go ahead and get started. There is a spreadsheet for you to check your answers, so make sure that you are doing that. And I need you to do 3 problems from part 3 of your assignment and 3 problems from part 4 of your assignment. If you have questions, raise your hand, but please refer back to your notes before you do that.